my yarny friends, I'm Sara Sach, and welcome back to my crochet channel. Today's video is going to be the finish up and trim from our PW, which is Pioneer Woman 5-spice crochet along throw blanket. That's a lot to say. Basically what we did is we have 5 yarns, the 5 3-weight colorways of the Pioneer Woman yarn, and then we did 5 different stitch patterns. Okay, so Monday we did granny style, granny stitch style. Tuesday we did cross stitches. Wednesday we did front and back post. Thursday we did the triple crunch. And then on Friday we did front and back loops and also learned where that third loop was. And doesn't that make a beautiful stitch pattern? So we did 5 rows plus a double crochet row in between, and that's rows 1 through 30. And then you're going to repeat row 1 through 30 2 more times or more, depending on how much bigger you're making your blanket. For the pattern as written, you'll repeat these 30 rows 2 more times. And that's how far you should be today. If you're looking for steps 1 through 5, there is a link down below to a playlist here on YouTube, and that's where we've been putting all the videos. Today's video will also be put in that playlist. You can click that link and all the videos for this particular crochet along will be right there for you. There's also a link underneath there that says crochet pattern. If you click that link, it'll take you to the blog that has the written pattern with a whole bunch of pictures. It's probably one of the longest blogs I've ever written. Now, if you've been going there every day, remember to refresh that page. And that's that little arrow that looks like it's almost a circle and has a little arrow on the end, usually up in the corner on your phone or tablet or computer. You just click that. It refreshes the blog page so that all the new stuff that I've been adding will show up. If you just go back and don't refresh, it'll take you back where you were because it remembers where you've been. All right, so we used the coral stripes for the first section, the coral for the next section. This third section is called Brilliant Blooms, which is a long striping yarn. Then we had a solid royal blue, and then we ended with the teal stripes here. Now we're not going to use a different yarn for the trim. I decided that I'm just going to use some of the leftover colors and do the trim that way. And that's what I did on this blanket. You can see I used the variegated of the teal stripes. And I think I also put some of the solid blue in here. I can't remember. But before we do that, I'm going to show you how to weave in all those ends. Everywhere where we changed colors, you have an end that has those 2 tail ends, and I'm going to show you how to weave those in nice and neatly. There's a couple of ways you can do that, and I'm going to show you those first, and then we're going to do a trim of a row of half double crochets around, and then we're going to do this cute stitch. This is called Drunken Granny. I call it Tipsy Granny. It's also been called Slanted Granny, because basically you're doing 3 double crochets, but we're tilting over. And I just love how it finishes off this blanket in this really nice trim. Okay, now, I love this trim, but if you want to do a different trim, you go right ahead. All right? So if you haven't finished up your repeats of 1 through 30, go ahead and do that, and then come back to this video. I'll show you how to do those ends and weave those in neatly. Then we'll do that trim. All right, see you back here in just a couple of seconds. Oh, and I wanted to mention, a lot of people have been saying, I've been getting emails and messages about how this particular yarn is not soft. Well, my blanket is super soft. I'm going to tell you how I got my blanket super soft at the end of this video. So stay tuned so your blanket can be super soft too. We changed colors every 6 rows because we have that double crochet row, and then we have our 5 rows of our stitch pattern on each one of our color changes. Now, where I finished off, oh, this is my swatch, not my actual blanket, so it is smaller, just a reminder. Where I finished off, I am not going to weave this one in because we're going to be joining in the color that we're going to do for our trim around. But we do have these ends, okay? And what I do with them, I've done this many different ways, but what I do with them is I'll thread on the color, and then I will weave it in, going through fibers and stitches. I'll go up, then I'll go up a stitch and go back. And then I'll go back in. All right, that's one way that you can do that, and then you just snip that off. That's one way that that can be done. Another way that I do sometimes is especially if my yarn tail that I left is just a little bit smaller, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and thread that on. Now make sure you stay in the color, because if I weave this teal one in the coral, some of that teal might show through. All right, so I'm just going to go up a couple stitches, and then I'll turn and come back out, and then I'll just pull that off. Then when I come back through and do my trim, I'll stitch over that, and I'll show you that when we do the trim. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and weave these ends in on my swatch here so that I can show you how to do the trim. But that's 2 ways that you can do it. You can weave it in back and forth 2 or 3 times, go through fibers and stitches, and then trim it off. Or you can just go in a couple stitches and come back out because you weaved that in, and then you can stitch over that as we do the trim. And I'll show you how to stitch over it. And I do both these different ways depending on, you know, how much yarn I've left or what I'm just doing with it. The main thing is when I'm doing a blanket, I want to make sure I've got that weaved in nice and tight so that they don't pop out. That is so annoying to put it through the wash, pull it out of the dryer or out of the washer to hang up and see those ends pop out. And the best way to keep that from happening is when you're weaving in, go through stitches, go through the fibers of the yarn, go back and forth, like right through the stitch that you just did. All right, it's really quite simple. It's just time consuming. So let's tidy up the side of our blanket, because all your ends should be on one side. The other side should not have any. I tidied up by weaving in all of my ends, and don't forget to do this one where we started, or you'll end up having to do that at the end. All right, so I like to just get them all done. Now this is the one we left, so I can show you how to stitch over that, and then this is where we're going to join in our new yarn. Okay, so I'm going to bring in my new yarn, and make sure you're on the front of your work. Your braid rows here that look like braids are facing up, your front posts are facing up, so that you can see that this is the front of your work, okay? Because this is what we're going to do. We're going to be stitching around. So we're going to evenly half double crochet down the side of our work. And when you're working down the side of the stitches, it can be a little bit hard knowing where to put your stitches. There is not a certain amount that you have to have. But the key to getting it nice and even is to try to go in the sides of the stitches and in the stitches themselves and not the holes. Okay, so there I stitched in the side of that stitch. And let me show you what happens if I stitch in this hole. It leaves a big gaping hole. All right, so you don't want to do that. You want to go through some of those fibers of the stitch. All right, and now we're going to deal with this tail. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay it down across the color that it is. It's teal, so you want that to be across the teal. If you put it across the coral over here, it might show through. All right, and so then we'll go ahead and do our half double crochet stitches over that tail of yarn. And usually you'll end up doing 2 or 3 or maybe 4, depending how much you've left. Okay, I'm going to pull that loop just a little bit big. I'm going to turn this over, and we have just this little bit here, and then I'll just go ahead and clip that. All right, it's weaved in, and then we stitched over it. If you did it with a long tail of yarn, you can always go back in and weave it in some more if you feel like it's not going to hold. Okay, these other ones we don't have to worry about because we already weaved them in. All right, and so we're going to stitch half double crochets, and we're going to stitch them around all 4 sides of our blanket. And again, try your best to go through stitches and not holes on the sides. And you want to try to get it as even as possible. And when we get down to the corner, we'll stitch 3 half double crochets in the corner, and then across the bottom we have stitches to work in. Then we'll stitch 3 half double crochets in this corner, and then we'll work back up this side, and we don't have to worry about weaving in on this side because all of our weave-ins were on the other side. And then we'll stitch 3 half double crochets in this corner, and then work back across here and join back up. All right, so I'm going to work down this first side, and then I'll show you how to make those 3 half double crochets in that corner so it moves smoothly around the corner. The color of yarn is up to you that you choose for your trim. I just randomly chose what I had. If you finished with a certain color and you don't want to cut your yarn, you want to continue with that color, that's totally fine too. All right, so I'm going to continue working my half double crochets down the side of my swatch till I reach the corner. I have evenly half double crocheted all the way down the side of my swatch, and now I'm to the corner here. I've stitched 1 half double crochet, and I'm going to stitch 2 more in this corner. Whoops, I put it in the knot, didn't mean to do that. All right, 1 and 2. So now we have 3 half double crochets in this corner. That's going to make your corner move around smoothly. And then across the bottom, we'll just stitch a half double crochet in each of those stitches going all the way across. All right, and then we'll just continue on around, making sure we have 3 half double crochets in each of our corners until we reach back over here. All right? All righty. I have half double crocheted on all 4 sides of my swatch, and again, this is a lot smaller, so it's not the size of your blanket, but I have stitched those 3 half double crochets in the corners, and then we stitched across the top, half double crochets, and then 3 half double crochets in that last stitch. So now we're going to join to that first half double crochet with a slip stitch and chain 3. So now we've chained 3, and we're going to stitch that Tipsy Granny trim. So we're going to place 2 double crochets in this same half double crochet. And that makes 3, so it looks like the regular granny square type stitch. We're going to skip the next 2 and slip stitch in the next stitch and chain 3. Then we'll place 2 more double crochets in that same half double crochet. We'll skip the next 2 and slip stitch in the next and chain 3. And so what that does is it takes that 3 double crochet that's similar to our granny stitch and just tilts it over. So Granny is tilted or tipsy. And I just really, like I said, I really love this stitch. I think it's so pretty on the edge of things. So we're stitching 2 more double crochets in the same stitch as our chain 3 and our slip stitch. We're going to skip 2, slip stitch in the next, and chain 3. Now, something to remember is that when we did our half double crochet row, we didn't have a set amount of stitches. And so when you get back around, it may not equal out the same. You may have to skip 3, or you may have to just skip 1. But I'll show you that when I get all the way back around my swatch. All right, so we slip stitched, chain 3, 2 double crochets in the same stitch as those, and then skip 2 and slip stitch in the next and chain 3. And we'll do this working all the way around our whole blanket. So I stitched my Tipsy Granny all the way around. You can see on the corners, you just ease around the corners. Here I changed colors. I ran out of the teal or the coral one. But I just continued working down the side with my tipsy or slanted grannies. Now, when you get to the end, here is the end. And instead of having 3, I have 4. And so I'm going to go ahead and skip 3 instead of 2 and hook in. Okay, now if you can only skip 1, that's okay. You just have to make sure that it's going to lay pretty. All right, so here's my slip stitch, chain 3, and my 2 double crochets. Normally we skip 2 and go to the next. All right, but I want to hook back into my first slip stitch. And so I'm going to skip 3 and go into that stitch instead of just skipping 2. The key is you want it to look pretty and lay nice. All right, and so then I'll just clip my yarn. I'm going to pull that up a little because I'm going to go under here and I'm going to pull that loop to the back just to make it nice and pretty. And then I'm going to tie off to the back. Now you can see where I did that because I've changed colors. But if you use the same color, that loop won't be as noticeable, but it's not going to matter. All right, and so the last thing I need to do is weave in these 3 ends, the one where I changed colors for the half double crochets and then the 2 here for the next row. So here is my completed swatch. It's a really nice size, and I think I'm going to put it on the dresser in my room where I have my Pioneer Woman guest room that's decorated in the Pioneer Woman things, and that's why I wanted to make the big blanket. This is a nice size. Measures about 16 by 9. So I'm going to put it on the dresser. It's a nice swatch. It turned out beautiful, and it's going to match my blanket. All right, now let's talk about the blanket. I had a lot of people talking about how the yarn is just a little bit scratchy, and I agree with them. It is very scratchy, but it is beautiful. Okay, and so what I did, you'll notice mine's really soft. I wish you could feel it. What I did is I put it in my wash machine on a gentle cycle. I used 1 tablespoon of liquid detergent, and I use the Tide that's free and clear. It doesn't have any scents or any dyes in it because we all have sensitive skin. So it's 1 tablespoon of your liquid detergent, and then in the softener, put 1 tablespoon of white distilled vinegar. All right, and just run it through a gentle cycle with just 1 wash and 1 rinse. Okay, that way it doesn't like knot it all up and stuff. I'm really, when I make a blanket, especially you put a lot of work into this, and I worry about things getting tangled and knotted up in the wash machine. Okay, so anyway, I washed it on a gentle cycle. When it was done, I partially dried it in my dryer. I just did a quick dry. I think it was 12 minutes. It didn't completely dry it, but it got most of the moisture out. Then I just laid it across the top of my dryer. Super simple. And then, of course, I did a load of towels. Towels take longer to dry. And so as those towels dried in my dryer, this was drying on top of my dryer. Okay? But it's that white vinegar that really helps soften it up. You can put fabric softener also. I use it just on my whites because I don't like scratchy socks. But anyway, I did not use any fabric softener on this blanket. Like I said, 1 tablespoon of liquid detergent and 1 tablespoon of white distilled vinegar, gentle cycle, and it is super soft. All right. So if you're working along and you're frustrated, distilled vinegar is super cheap, and I bet you already have your laundry detergent. If you don't have liquid laundry detergent and you use a powder, that's fine, or another method. That's totally fine. But I wanted to wash it separate from my other things. And that's why I did the tablespoon. Now, I use pods, so I opened it up and I measured out the tablespoon, and then I'm setting it aside for another load of laundry that's maybe a smaller load. All right? But that's how you can get this to soften up and make a beautiful throw blanket that's going to be soft and cozy. So that is our blanket. You can see that I've got my trim on, and I absolutely love it. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And I think it's like the cherry on the cupcake, because it just adds and puts together all the colors. And you can use, like, I've got the darker blue here. I've got some of the darker teal, the lighter teals, and some of the coral, I think, on... Actually, I don't have coral on the trim on this one. Anyway, it makes all the colors come together, and it's just beautiful. So I hope you've really enjoyed making your blanket. If you haven't finished your blanket, like I say, do not panic. I'm going to put them all together in a PDF file. So if you want to download it on Ravelry, you can, but it'll always be on the blog, and it will always be in that playlist here on YouTube.